To many, the name of Isambard Kingdom Brunel is synonymous with the Great Western Railway, and to this day his rail link from London to the southwest stands as a testament to Brunel's ability as an engineer. He surveyed every mile on foot or horseback, and where he met high ground he carved out cuttings, and where he met low-lying areas he built embankments. Between Bath and Chippenham he drove a 2-mile tunnel through the Box Hill, and where there were rivers to be crossed he built bridges like the one over the Thames at Maidenhead, which to this day boast the widest, shallowest brick-built arch in the world. At the same time, the SS Great Britain was being built in Bristol as part of Brunel's bigger plan, which was to link London via Bristol with New York with a scheduled service. The SS Great Britain was to be the largest ship yet built, and as a result it was necessary to build a special dry dock for it. The entrance to the dock was sealed by an enormous bowl-shaped caisson, which was floated into place and then flooded. Although it was built with 6 masts, due to the vagaries of the wind, if the Great Britain were to run to schedule, it would have to carry sufficient coal to keep the boilers and the great engine running continuously throughout the Atlantic crossing. The Great Britain was the first large ocean-going ship to be built from metal. The hull was constructed in the traditional way, but the frames and the planks were all made from wrought iron. Had timber been used, the ship would almost certainly have foundered in the heavy Atlantic rollers. Another feature new at the time was the method of propulsion. Intrigued by the sight of a small boat being driven by an Archimedes screw, Brunel applied the principle to the design of this propeller. It was much more efficient than paddle wheels in use at the time, and only slightly less efficient than a modern screw. A large rudder needed to steer the ship, needed a lot of effort from the crew at the wheel on deck, but by placing the turning point of the rudder behind its leading edge, water pressure on the front section helped it to be turned more easily. The Great Britain's massive engine was constructed in a building alongside the dock, and when installed it projected up through 3 of the decks of the ship. The engine consisted of 4 cylinders, each with a 7-foot 4-inch bore and a 6-foot stroke. Mounted on the crankshaft was a huge drum, which was linked by 4 chains to a smaller drum on the propeller shaft, which, geared up by a ratio of 1:3, turned at a normal rate of 54 revolutions per minute, enabling the Great Britain to achieve a speed of around 12 knots. So what is it like to take a voyage on this ship? As we go through the dockyard entrance, we see flags flying, and our gaze is drawn to the immense length of this great ship. Passing round the magnificently ornate stern, we walk along the dockside past barrels of water, a lifeboat which is also made of iron, a fender, cables, and all the paraphernalia of the shipyard. Before boarding, we must take a look at the bow, with its bowsprit pointing towards the Atlantic Ocean and the start of our adventure yet to come. Having climbed the steps to get on board, we get our first sight of the ship from deck level. Forward of the huge funnel there are many encumbrances on deck. Not unexpected are the skylights, winches, anchors and a capstan, and even cows to supply milk for the voyage. But who could have thought to see these curious coops, complete with feed barrels for chickens, to supply eggs for the captain's table and his favoured guests. As we walk back along the deck, there is more space to enjoy a breath of fresh air when the weather is fine. But this is only for the privileged few. On reaching the stern, we see the ship's wheel, which controls the giant rudder, and a skylight providing daylight for the first-class saloons below. Immediately below the weather deck at the rear of the ship is the first-class passengers' promenade saloon, where we may socialise with the other passengers or take gentle exercise clear of the weather above. The doors down either side of this deck and the one below lead to the privacy of one's cabin. If we go through another of the doors, we pass the ship's barber, and in the next cabin a young woman stares out to sea. She has just written a letter telling her sister of her nephew who is seriously ill in the cabin opposite, and is worried that her children might also succumb. Further along there is a bathroom for the ladies, and a small lounge where they may relax from the hustle and bustle of life aboard ship. Returning to the promenade deck, we pass the great man himself, sitting admiring his handiwork, and come to the skylight, below which is another, which lets light through to the dining saloon below. Here, as on the promenade deck above, the iron framework of the ship is enclosed to give the impression of marble pillars supporting the ornate ceiling. Leaving the first-class accommodation, we pass the captain's cabin, where he's discussing the ship's fuel requirements with the chief engineer. As we carry on along the passageway, we come to the massive engine labouring away, and opposite the personalised cabins of the officers. Farther on, the galley, lit only by oil lamps and the glow from the ovens, looks rather small for a ship of this size. But apart from the smoked haddock, which is running low, the stores do look well stocked for the voyage. Meals for the other passengers are served from this bench and are taken by them back to their berths. Second-class cabins are very small, and the lack of space often leads to fights. And although the bunks are comfortable, with 4 to a cabin there's very little privacy. For the steerage passengers, privacy is non-existent. Seemingly endless corridors of bunk after bunk, with barely space to pass between them. Tubs to wash one's clothes are provided, but with no headboards between the bunks, a trip to Australia will seem very long indeed. Having previously been converted to a 3-masted windjammer, the Great Britain was severely damaged rounding Cape Horn in 1886 and sought shelter in the Falklands, where she was used as a wool store until 1937 before being abandoned. In 1970 the remains of the Great Britain were brought back to Bristol and to the dock where she was built. Many items of interest regarding the ship were housed in a museum alongside, and work to restore her to her former glory was started. In order to prevent further corrosion damage, a glass ceiling was built over the dock at the level of the ship's waterline, and dehumidifiers were installed. The dock above the ceiling has been flooded, and now we see this great ship, which changed forever the way the ships were constructed, lying apparently afloat once more in the place where she was built.
If you see a sailing ship, it might be a lass. Get your civvies ready for another run ashore. A sailor ain't a sailor, ain't